Welcome to this week's edition of Black Authors Matter TV, where we interview the latest movers and shakers in the African American literary community. You'll meet some old friends, discover new ones, and stay abreast of the latest book developments around the country and even the world. So sit back and relax for the next 2 hours with Black Authors Matter TV co-hosts Gwen Richardson and Dr. Rhonda Lawson.
Well, welcome to Black Authors Matter TV. It is June 21st, and we're excited about having another amazing show. I'm Gwen Richardson, your host for tonight, along with my co-host,
Dr. Rhonda Lawson. Good evening, everyone.
And we have another wonderful, amazing lineup once again. Welcome back to the show, or welcome for the first time if you're a new viewer. Yesterday was my birthday, so I got so much love from social media. Thank you. I'm going to respond to each and every person. It might take me a week, but because I got like 400 things to respond to. But I like to at least acknowledge individually, not just like, but I like to say thank you to each individual person. So it takes me several days to get through that, but I will do so. And thank you so much. I don't take it for granted. So,
You're a good one, Gwen. My birthday's next week, and I can never get through the happy birthdays. So
I just take one of I do a few a day until I'm totally finished.
We're both Cancers. Are you a Cancer or a Gemini?
No, I'm on the cusp. I'm a Gemini. So I'm right on the cusp. So okay. I'm a Gemini, as are my husband and daughter. It's a house full of Gemini. So my birthday is last. And my daughter's is first, and my husband's is 5 days after hers. So anyway, welcome to the show. I have a couple of announcements, and then we have 3 books to give away at the top of the show. So first, I want to let you all know that for the National Black Book Festival this year in October, vendor space is completely sold out.
All right.
So if you didn't get a chance to sign up, people are already asking about 2023. So that registration opens in January for next year's event. And the Jerry Pinkney Children's Book Awards process has already concluded. The evaluation process has begun. We have a panel of judges. So the finalists will be announced August 16th on this show. So the second half of this show on August 16th will be exclusively for announcing the finalists for the Children's Book Awards. So without further ado, we're going to give away 3 books, and then we'll bring on our first guest. First, the first book is called, let me put them in order of what I told Rhonda I was going to do. This first book is called Long Past Summer. The author's name is, I think it's Nue Kerwin, K-I-R-W.
Kerwin. It could be Kerwin.
And the trivia question for this book is, the book's main character, Michaela Marchand, is successful in what profession? Book's main character, and Rhonda's going to paste the questions on the chat, on the comments. So if you get that, what is the profession for the main character of this book? The next one is called The Thread Collectors. And this is a historical fiction book by Shauna Edwards and Allison Richmond. They're 2 authors for this book. So the question for this book is, the paths of the 2 main characters, Stella and Lily, converge in which southern city? So name the city, you'll get a copy of this book. And then finally, we have a children's book. And hold on one second, let me get it. It's called Hold Them Close, A Love Letter to Black Children. And this is one where they combine photography with collage art, and the inside is very interesting. So the author's name is Jamila Tompkins Bigelow. And the question is, the author is a Philadelphia educator who teaches what subject to young people? or to youth. So this book is called Hold Them Close. And if you answer that one correctly, you'll get a book. Okay, so our first guest tonight, did you have something? Somebody already answered?
Stephanie was not playing with us tonight.
Okay, which one did she get?
She said the main character is a successful lawyer.
That's correct for this book. So Stephanie, you get that one. He is not playing. Okay. All right. So our lineup for tonight, our first guest is historical fiction author Piper Huguley. And we're going to bring her on now. And we also have tonight an author and executive editor of Mom Life Today, Kirsten Watson. We have Kaia Alderson, or Kaia Alderson. She's a best-selling historical fiction author. And we also have Suzette Harrison, a best-selling historical fiction author. So we got a lot of history tonight on the show. And we're excited because, as you all know, if you watch this show, I love history, and historical fiction is my very favorite category. So I have been wanting to meet and talk to Piper Huguley for quite some time. I've seen her books for many years and just never had an opportunity to meet her and talk. So I'm glad to have her on the show tonight. Welcome to Black Authors Matter TV, Piper.
Thank you so much, Gwen. I'd have talked to you any old time. You just could have called me up. There was no problem. But no need to wait, girl.
Well, every time I see
here.
a new book that you come out with, I say, you know what, I need to touch base with her. So I'm glad we had an opportunity to have you on the show.
Yes, I appreciate
with
it.
your new book that you have out called By Her Own Design. And we gave the book away. We give away the advanced reading copies on the show.
Oh, cool.
And it was maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago when we gave it away to one of our viewers. And we do it based on trivia questions about the storyline or the author of the book. Okay. So the first question I want to ask is your name, is Piper your real name? Is it a family name? Is your real name? So is it a family name or?
No, my mother is just a very creative person. It's a musical name. I'm the child of 2 very accomplished musicians. My father was a classically trained opera singer. And my mother and he would go around town and sing at people's weddings and funerals and the choirs and all this other kind of stuff. And they wanted to name their first child in a musical way. And of course, I can't sing a note. So
I wanted to ask you, did you pick up on the talent?
No, of course not. That's never the way that works, Rhonda. No. Here, my mother would say, you sing in a different way.
Oh, that was nice of her.
Because spare us the other way, you know.
It's like pipes, I guess, like Piper or Piper. Or she's got pipes.
Yeah, so, she's got pipes. That's exactly how it was. My mother's soprano had pipes, and she would call me Pipes from time to time.
Oh, okay. Wonderful. Now, was your mother an opera singer too, or did she just?
No, she wasn't classically trained, but she could sing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And do they still sing? Are they still?
They're not alive anymore, but yeah, they're very well known in Pittsburgh in terms of what they would do over the years. So.
Oh, okay. Wonderful. Now, what made you pick historical? Because I think all of your books are historical fiction, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, somebody's got to be out here lifting up our history.
Yes.
Okay. And you're right. And I love it because that's, like I said, that's my very favorite.
Yeah. Because like I say, that's my mother was like, you can't sing, but here you could do this, because there are not enough people who know of the great things that we as a people have done.
Right.
And it's a work that requires a lot of a certain kind of labor and a certain kind of time. So just sort of been uniquely outfitted in order to be able to do this. And it's an honor and it's a privilege. And like I said, it's been my life's work in order to talk about and lift up these people of the past who have been through some things. And they can remind us of that, because if they hadn't been through the things they had been through, we wouldn't be here.
Right.
So I'm about honoring them.
Now, I like what you said. You said that this is your life's work. When did you realize that telling these stories would be your life's work, or that you wanted this to be your life's work?
Girl, my head was as hard as a rock for the longest time. You know, I said, it was like trying to impart this. I would, for Halloween as a child, I wouldn't be like the conventional TV thing. I was always somebody from history. I was a pilgrim one year, Betsy Ross another year,
Wow.
Laura Ingalls Wilder another year. My mother would sew my little costumes. And then once the maturity happened, I grew out of that pattern. And that was it for Halloween. But I was always somebody in history. I was always doing stuff that was always historical growing up. And it just wasn't even until I was a professor in the classroom and realizing how much I was having to talk about our history to the students before they could even begin to understand the literature. And it made me realize and go investigate, there's some history education that is not happening out here in the world. And historical fiction is one way to fill in those blanks.
Right.
I was honored that my book was listed by Parents Magazine as a way for children, for teenagers to learn about Black history. Because how are they going to get it? I mean, how are they going to begin to understand some of the things that we've been through as a people? So I was hoping that this might be a way.
I hate that because I learned Black history in elementary. And in high school, I took a year. I mean, it was one of the electives that I took for a whole year of Black history. So I don't know when they took it out of the schools or what happened. But if you don't know your history, you're lost because you don't understand what people had to do to get you here.
Exactly.
I mean, that is very humbling and sobering.
I like to play little games with them. It's like, even in terms of popular culture and how Black history is discussed, how many Black biopics are there that feature real life Black women?
Harriet Tubman, that was one. Okay, now, and they had Women of the Movement, but that was just about
that was on TV.
That was on TV. So
I'm
you're
talking about feature film.
Okay, feature film. I can't remember another one. I'm not saying there isn't another one, but if there was, I would have gone to see it because that's I support our cultural films, like especially something that's positive. If it's just shoot 'em ups or just but I don't support those. Although I have seen sometimes, it's good to have humor is good for the soul. Yeah. So if it's a good humorous movie, I'll go watch it. But are there any other ones, Piper?
There's 10 total.
Okay, 10. So okay, I'll give you one, but I don't know if it was on TV or at the movies. The one about Dorothy Dandridge.
That was TV.
Okay, that was TV.
Yeah.
Okay.
10
well, are you counting
all of cinematic history?
Okay, now are you counting? Is it okay? Name me another one so I know what.
Another one was Queen of Catway. That was one by
Queen
Disney.
Of what?
Queen of Catway, that featured the chess champion in Uganda.
Okay. I didn't see that.
Okay. That was one. We always count What's Love Got to Do with It.
Well, that's true. And I love that movie. I've seen it many.
Billie Holiday. Now we have 2 Billie Holiday movies.
Right, you're right. Lady Sings the Blues. Okay. And the one by Audra Day, but that one.
Yeah.
Was that one in the movies?
That was in the movies, yes.
Okay. I saw it on
released
TV.
Theatrically. Yeah.
Okay.
But it was the pandemic, that's why. But it was released theatrically.
Okay. Lady Sings the Blues, that's right.
Yeah.
Okay, what's another one?
Yeah, so you see us we're running out.
Right.
We're running
it's
low
like
in terms of like
5 years
numbers,
or whatever.
Hidden Figures.
Hidden Figures. Okay. Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, but you see how it is.
Yeah.
We need these stories.
We do. So are your characters, are your books centered around female characters all the time?
Yes.
Is the main character?
Yeah. Yes,
okay.
Pretty
and
much.
how many books do you have so far?
I have a double digits now in terms of my books. So, but
Okay,
this is my
good.
first biographical historical novel, which was always in the phase. It's like what I call phase 2 of my writing career, where I was writing historical romance, and now moving on to hopefully writing more of this biographical historical fiction about unsung Black women across history.
Okay, because your other books are, the time period is factual, but the characters are fictional.
Right,
So,
exactly.
and they might be even based on real people, but
yes, exactly.
you know, they're
exactly.
not. Yeah, it's real.
And I've dropped in real people before, but they've never been like the main character. So you're right.
All right. So what was your first book?
My first book was The Preacher's Promise, which was the opening book in my Home to Milford College series. It's centered around a fictitious HBCU. And the way that I always thought about it is in terms of our accomplishments in building these institutions were never talked about. So that's why I wanted to write a series about what it took for something like that to get off the ground.
Oh, okay. This is interesting. The HBCUs, I seem like they're getting more recognition now than they, you know, they weren't for a while, and then you only heard about them if it was something negative. But they have really turned it around in terms of students really wanting to go to one, being successful at them, graduating. And the thing I really like about HBCUs, which I didn't go to one. But I admire the people who do. My daughter went to one. And well, everybody in my family went to one except me. My siblings, my dad, my mother, she didn't, but she didn't go to college until we were out of school. She went as an adult.
She went back,
She went back to get her bachelor's because she didn't, while she was raising children, she didn't go. But the thing I like is the people, they go back. They really enjoy going back. They make lifelong friends. They have fond memories of the experience. They, you know, support the school. You know, there's a lot of school pride.
Yes, there's a lot of school pride and things in terms of how they know how they came about and the sacrifices that it took for Black people to continuously maintain these institutions in terms of understanding just how important they are still.
Right.
So,
right. So tell us about your new book, By Her Own Design, a novel of Anne Lowe, fashion designer to the social register.
Yes, Anne Lowe, it was a Negro fashion designer, as it was called in those days, and her story had been kind of erased by history. She was a fashion designer for whom her clientele did not speak her name. So you know how important that is. You see the Oscars every year, you see the Met Gala, whatever it asks, what are you wearing? And somebody will speak the name of the person, right? Somebody put on Anne Lowe dress. So it's easier to just kind of overlook her contributions, two of which we know were Jackie Bouvier, Jackie Kennedy's wedding gown, which is one of the most photographed wedding gowns in history.
Okay.
And the dress that Olivia de Havilland wore when she won her first Oscar. But she designed for Vanderbilt's, Roosevelt's, DuPont's, all of these famous, rich, wealthy women. Marjorie Meriwether Post of the Post cereal fortune, she designed for all of those women.
Wow.
So what time period was she actively?
She was born in 1898, Clayton, Alabama, and had to take up her first commission at the age of 16 when her mother died unexpectedly while she was designing 4 dresses for the First Lady of Alabama. And I have it in the book where she goes and tells her that her mother died. And you know, the First Lady's like, I'm sorry to hear that, but what happened to my dresses? And so,
Wow.
yeah, and from a very young child, she was a bit of a prodigy in terms of her sewing skills, which is why she was able to finish the commission. And she was off to the races after that, up until she retired in 1972. Lost her eyesight doing it.
Lost her eyesight.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah.
So she does have a so sorry. We're having emergencies in here.
Oh, sorry. That's why she muted herself.
That's when it's live, anything can happen.
That's true.
So Anne Lowe, she did she have a family, or was her profession her?
Yeah, she did have a family. She had she was married twice and had one son who has had descendants who, have contacted me about the book, etc. Some of them contacted me over the weekend saying they saw me in the Costco in terms of the book. Yeah, and everything. So yeah, she does have had a family, has descendants. Mm-hmm.
So did you contact them when you wrote the book? Did you
well, when I was writing the book, I couldn't find them. So
so they found you.
That's
amazing.
Yeah, it is. I'm saying this is my great grandmother, and so yeah. And they have some artifacts that are very interesting. Would have been very interesting to me if I'd had them while I was writing the book. But of the people who've read it so far, they have really appreciated what I did. So.
Okay, so what are some things about Anne Lowe, other than her being a designer? What was the arc of her career? Like she started off with this, with the First Lady of Alabama's inauguration or ball or whatever.
Yes, she was a child bride. She was married at a very young age to an abusive man. And this is part of what she overcame in terms of this marriage to an abusive man. When her mother and her grandmother, who were seamstresses to all of these very influential women in Alabama in the state legislature, and who I just mentioned, the First Lady, when they both died, they moved back to his home city in Dothan, and she came across Mrs. Josephine Lee, who is a wife of a citrus magnate from Florida, and had 4 daughters and was looking for someone to sew for her daughters. So she moved to Tampa. She took up her son and left her husband, moved to Tampa to sew for this woman, and became the Gasparilla designer. So people who know about Tampa know that they had that festival every year with a full-out court of kings and queens or whatever. She designed for them and was named Gasparilla designer during the 20s, and saved up enough money to open her own shop in New York in the 20s, and had a series of shops in New York in the center of fashion there on Madison Avenue. For a time, she had several shops up there.
Wow, that's amazing.
And all this Black history we don't know.
I've heard of a lot of people. I miss hearing about her.
And when we think about fashion designers, we up here a lot, and we talk about Dior and Laurent and all this other stuff. This woman should have been someone that was known to us in terms of this, but for finances and people not speaking her name when.
Well, unfortunately, she was working for people who took the credit from her.
Yes.
And never told anybody who she was or the talent that she had.
Yep.
And which is unfortunately what happened to a lot of people in those days. Who basically were the talent behind the face.
So that my book hopefully is a contribution to restoring Anne to her rightful place, at least every February and March,
Right. Well, one thing that happens with Black history that's unfortunate is that all the institutional history is getting better. But all of the institutional history, they focus on about 10 people, and that's it.
That's it.
So you don't hear about other people. You just hear the same names over and over, Martin Luther King. And these people are important, of course, but they're not the only people.
That's it. And we get the same story. That's a bit of a mythology. That's not really realistic. I think particularly about Rosa Parks in terms of her story being a myth. and not giving her credit as what she was, a social justice warrior, in terms of the protests being set up, her being selected to do that because of who she was in the community. And that had been her work for some time. She wasn't just some random old lady who was tired, you know.
Right. I think she was the secretary for the NAACP.
Right.
And a lot of people don't know that another young woman actually,
Claudette Colvin.
yes, she actually didn't want to give up
before
her seat
Rosa Parks.
before Rosa Parks, but she was a teenager. She was pregnant, and she also used profanity during the whole interaction with the police.
Yep.
So they were looking for basically someone who's could sign up for sainthood.
Yep.
To represent
married. Some people say
movement.
light skin too.
Yes, that made a difference.
Yeah.
So,
who would be the face?
Yeah. So I'm glad that we're hearing another name. I wonder if she's related to the Lowe's, like the Lowe's, how people, the Home Depot competitor.
You know, I don't know about that. Her father,
I mean, their names are, that's not a common name, but it's not an uncommon name either.
True.
You
her
know,
father was, we don't know much about him. And this is one of the reasons why I wanted to write this novel, because I want for a textile scholar, hopefully, to be inspired and to come along and really do that deep digging that her life requires to get that real comprehensive biography that we need of her. So, yeah, I'm hopeful. They may be in terms of that. But
I feel like this is a story that needs to be sent to these fashion magazines, you know, such as a Cosmo or Mademoiselle. They need to know who the trailblazers are. And it's not just the people whom they're thinking. There's so many more people.
Vogue did something a couple of months ago. I didn't mention the book, but they did do something a couple months ago. The Council of Fashion Designers is supposed to be featuring it in some way coming up.
And that's good.
So I'm hopeful of that. Yeah.
Well, that's a great time to really promote this book so people can learn more about her story.
Absolutely. I agree with you. Yes.
So something that you said really stuck in my mind, because it seems to be very common for, and I don't know about others. I know about Black women who are accomplished, who are very, ambitious for doing things. They tend to end up with men who abuse them or don't appreciate them or don't support them, or that seems to be somewhat common.
Yeah.
And now you said she was married twice. Was her second marriage more successful? Did she?
For a time, but she was obsessed with what she wanted to do, and these men want you to be focusing on them. So
that is true. It's difficult for successful women, and even non-Black women. But I don't know. I just think it's more.
But imagine back then, no,
Well, back then, sure, definitely, because same thing happened with Tina Turner. It's so many women that happened with, and the portrayal even of Billie Holiday. From what I've read, the portrayal of how, what's his name, Claude, the man that she was with, the original Billie Holiday. Anyway, in Lady Sings the Blues, they had Billy D. Williams really being a very loving and attentive man. I think that was more because Billy D. was really, eye candy. And they didn't want to have him portrayed negatively.
Yeah.
But I think in the one with the Audra Day, that was a different relationship.
That was a little bit a little more realistic.
More realistic.
Because,
based on what actually took place. So,
yeah.
So what are you working on next? Do you have something you're working on next?
Yes, my next book will be called American Daughters, which is about the secret interracial friendship between Portia Washington and Alice Roosevelt, who were the daughters of Booker T. Washington and Theodore Roosevelt. These two women had a friendship that lasted the first part of the 20th century, that started after the explosion that happened when Teddy Roosevelt dared to invite Booker T. Washington up to the White House for dinner, honey, and the world got set on fire.
Mm.
Yeah.
So these two young women decided to become friends in spite of that. And that's what it's about.
Okay. Well, you know, there have been of late, there's more and more historical fiction centered around Black women being written.
Kicking the
Vanessa
door down.
Riley has a couple of books. You know, Victoria Christopher Murray had that first book, The Personal Librarian, with
Yep.
I can't think of the name of the co-author right now.
Marie
but-
Benedict.
Okay, and they're doing, their last name is Benedict, and they're doing another book that they're working on that I think comes out next year, centered on Mary McLeod Bethune and Eleanor Roosevelt.
Yep.
I'm thinking, okay.
Yep.
Yeah, so
It's time to kick that door in. We need
Right,
more
it
of
is.
these stories. It's been
Right.
too long.
right.
And that's, yeah. So, you know, about anybody back there pushing, it's me.
Okay. So let people know how they can get a copy of this new book by her own design, or in any of your books, how to connect with you on social media.
My social media is Piper Huguley, PiperHuguley, Piper G Huguley on Facebook, Piper_Huguley on Instagram, at Piper Huguley on Twitter, where I hang out the most. And By Her Own Design is available wherever books are sold. So.
Well, congratulations on the book and for telling this story that truly needed to be told.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
I wish I could have heard more of your story, but I was too busy making sure my house was.
Yeah, you don't want to be on fire. That was important. You had to check that. So
Right.
Okay.
Well, you can always look at the replay.
Yes, that's true.
And I do that usually every week. I don't do it all at once, but I do it just so I can hear how things went, and if I need to make any changes. So anyway, thank you so much, Piper, for being a guest on Black Authors.
Thank you. Nice talking to you both.
And nice
Same
talking to
here.
you. Have a great night.
Yes.
And
you
I'll
do
be
the
getting
same.
a copy of your book. Historical fiction is my thing.
Oh,
So
awesome. I hope you enjoy it when you do.
I will be getting a copy. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ladies. Have a good evening.
You too.
Bye-bye.
All righty. We need to give away the find out who won the other two books.
I think we have a couple winners. Let me scroll on. All right. So we got the first one that he was a lawyer, and that was by Stephanie Burnham.
Yes, we got that one. And this book, The Thread Collectors, the answer was, who got the answer? I saw Lydia Brew with the answer, but I don't know if she was the first person with the answer.
Mary Evans got the answer to Hold Them Close. The author is a Philadelphia educator who teaches what subject to the youth, and she's a teacher.
So that's Mary. Okay.
And I think Lydia got Stella and Lily.
Okay. Well, the answer though, it was New Orleans. New Orleans was the answer though.
Somebody said New Orleans. Yeah, it was Lydia.
Yeah, it was Lydia.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, you all, you know the drill, because all three of you have won books before, and you'll be getting your books in a few days. Thank you for participating. So we have our next guest, Kirsten Watson, and she has a book called Sis, Take a Breath. And when you hear that she's a mother of 7 children, then that's a reason for anybody to take a breath, because that's a lot of children. So I did actually see an interview with her on a television show, and I said, we need to have her on Black Authors Matter TV. So that's what I investigated and got the invite sent out, and we really appreciate your being on the show. So welcome to Black Authors Matter TV.
Thank you. I'm super excited to be here tonight with you guys.
We're super excited to have you. Thank you.
So first, let me ask you about your 7 children. Now, are all of these that you give birth to all these children, or is it a blended family, or some of them adopted? You know, it could be any combination of things.
Yeah, no, I gave birth to all 7 of these children with my husband We'll be married almost 17 years next month. So they are all ours.
Congratulations.
Well, God bless you. And, that's amazing. Do you have any twins?
Our last are twins. So I like even numbers. So we had 5. I was like, let's just go for the number 6. So everybody has a partner. And we got identical twins. So they're the first twins on both sides. Just, God splits the cells and you have twins, and that's what we have. So that's how we ended our crew with their 3-year-old identical boy twins.
Oh, that's amazing. Beautiful.
Oh,
So
thank you.
So how do you juggle giving attention to them all? Because some people say they have 2 kids. I only have 1, so I didn't have to split my attention. But how do you juggle it's only so many hours, it's a limited number of hours in the day. And as mothers or as parents, we always want each child to feel like they're not being slighted, they're getting, equal amount of attention. And so how are you able to do that?
The best that I can, day by day, with the Lord's help. I don't know that I have the perfect answer to that question, but I do know that I wake up, this is the part of the book, right? It's like, I need to take a breath and realize that there's only so much I can do. And God gives me the grace and the ability to persevere, and to, like, even right now, I mean, I'm normally about to go to bed because it has normally been a very busy day. And so I just honestly do the best that I can. And, we are really open and honest with our kids in terms of making sure that we're intentional with each of them. But then we also let them know we are human, and this is my first time doing this. Like, I am not an expert. So you're gonna have to work with me. I'm doing the best that I can. I think that's what I try to communicate to my kids as much as possible. I also try to ask them, like, what do you need from me? Each one of them needs something different. So it's not like a one size fits all.
Right.
So some of them just want to talk. Some of them just want to sit close to me while we watch a movie. Some of them want me to play a game. And so it's really recognizing and seeing what each kid needs, having them help to communicate those things and let them know that I'm doing my best to make sure that they feel special in some way, as much as I can. And I don't do that perfectly by any means. But like I said, I can't say it enough that I try my hardest to be intentional with each of them.
Right. I love what you said. Just what you ended with, that you try your best to be intentional, that you hadn't done this before. Because as much as we like to say parenting comes with a handbook, because there are so many child or parenting experts out there who have written books, everything doesn't apply to everybody. So you're really kind of feeling your way along on this, and kind of learning as you go.
Right. And that's what I always tell. I mean, a lot of moms will come up to me and say, tell me, how do I do this? I'm like, I don't know your child. And like, I don't even know your temperament. So even the way I approach things may be different for you, or how you run your house. And so, everybody wishes they had a one step, like, give me the 3 steps to make this child perfect. So we're all still looking for what that is. So it really is different, and a lot of it depends on your personality and how I'm wired with how I like to keep my house, and what is allowed and what's not allowed. It's going to be different for someone else's house. And so I always encourage moms to say, like, you were made for this, and you were made for your people. Like, God already knew who was going to be for you and be in your family, and you have what it takes. And don't try to be another mom, because that doesn't work. It doesn't work long term. And what you've been given, honestly, is what that child needs. And so we're learning. This is on the job learning. This is not something I went to school for, especially not 7. I thought, my husband and I thought we would have 4. 4 is a great number to do. And so we are way past our capacity and what we thought we were going to do in this life. And so, again, it's just, Lord, what have you equipped me with? And what are the gifts that you have given me? And clearly this was meant for me. So I need your help. And so through reading the word and through communicating and talking to my kids, like I said, being intentional, talking with my husband, we just are doing this day to day. And some days we feel like, we really did well. And there's other days I lay down, I'm like, I really messed up.
up.
It was not a gold star day, and I am exhausted, and I probably should go apologize to someone tonight because of how I reacted. And I think that the realness of that is what I hope my kids see more than anything. They don't see a perfect mom who got it right all the time, and they don't see a mom who gets it wrong all the time. They just see somebody who is really just trying to give their best every day, which is what I want them to do with all the stuff that they're involved in as well. School, sports, just giving your 100% every day and knowing that God will fill in those gaps when necessary.
And I'm guessing this is what you discuss in your book.
A lot of it is that I don't have a magic answer. I don't have it, but goodness, like we have been equipped with so much. And I think we go through our life going from one thing to the next thing to the next thing. We're busy. And I think as women, we want to do it perfectly. We want to do really, really well. And I guess my book is just an encouragement that, just stop for a second. Just take a breath. Even when it's really, really good, like realize what's going on. And especially when it's really tough, like God is speaking in all of those moments to us, trials and triumphs, encouraging us, helping us to take to do the next thing. And so the book is really just a way of encouraging you in your journey, because your journey is so unique and specific to you. And we need that experience. And if we don't recognize all the stuff that we've been given, man, we miss a lot. We can miss a lot of life and say, wow, I don't even know where the last 3 years went because we were doing a lot of stuff.
Right.
And so the book is to help you realize we can still do all those things, but just stop and pause and then take it in before you proceed. So that's really what the book is about.
What are your age ranges of your children?
Our oldest is 13. And so we have 13, 12, 10, 9, 6, and the twins are 3. So there's a 10-year gap between all 7 of the kids.
Oh, wow. So you're going to have to go through that preteen and teen stage a lot.
Multiple times.
Forever. What do you mean a lot? I mean, we just are starting. And so we have middle school, elementary school, and whatever they are, 3, no school. And so we have all of these people living in one house. And to your point of everybody is saying, mommy, mommy, mommy. Oh my gosh. Everyone, and then my husband will say, no one can say mommy for 5 minutes because it's crazy. And you're right, but it's one of those things I'll have to say it's super annoying at points, right? But just to know that, this is something bigger than me. And so we think about the Bible talks about our kids being arrows that we shoot into the world. And I take that, it's like when they're sleeping, it's beautiful, right? They're all quiet and no one, I'm like, man, this is an awesome opportunity that I have as their mom, just to help them along their way, whether it's somebody in school or somebody in their ballet. It's like everybody's experiencing these things and I get to meet them where they are. So it's a pretty cool experience.
Nice.
Some parents make the mistake I found, and sometimes they don't realize it till it's too late, but you can't be your children's friend, like their buddy. You have to be their mother, and that requires you to say no, or no, and the reason why, or no, because I said so. And some people want to be liked by their children, but sometimes your children will be angry with you. And what I always, my mother didn't, I won't say my mother didn't care, but she was so grounded in her mission to raise her 4 children that she was confident in her decision making. But what I would say when my daughter would be upset, to myself, you're gonna need me before I need you, so and that's the truth. You're gonna need to talk to me before I need to talk to you. So you'll get over it. So,
yes. Sometimes definitely the conversation looks like that for sure. I mean, we're right in the midst of middle school where it's like everybody else gets to fill in the blank and we don't
Right.
get to. And I was just telling my daughters, like, I know, and I agree. There probably are a lot of people who can do a lot of things that you can't do. I said, but you just have to trust me. Like, we are trying to make the best decisions that we can to protect you for as long as we can. And I was like, and if we make a bad choice, I promise I'll be the first one to apologize. But you just have to trust me that I love you more than you know.
And more than anybody else.
And anybody
Your
else.
parents love you more than anybody
Exactly.
else
Yes.
loves you. Period.
Right.
That's just
Right.
period.
And so as long as you trust that and know that if I make a mistake and I should have given you that phone 3 years ago, I will admit that. But exactly. Until then, we're just going to go on this thing of how we're going to do it. And it's going to look different from other families. And that's okay. And that is okay. So yes, we have these conversations all the time about why they're different and our expectations, and it'll be fine. It'll be fine.
Now, in the midst of raising all these children, you found time to be the executive editor of Mom Life Today. So, but you're probably one of the best experts at it because you've gone through it multiple times, and you just keeping everybody together. I mean, just organizing the day has to be a challenge. But tell us how did that come about? Is it a publication that you started or one that you signed on to?
Yes, it was Mom Life Today was started, well, now 15 years ago by a lady named Tracy Esther. She was around a lot of moms who were kind of complaining about motherhood and talking about all the hardships, and that's a real thing. And so she decided 15 years ago now to start something called Mom Life Today. It was going to be an area where this was when blogging was really in, and writing. And so she got a bunch of different moms that had older kids that were out of the house, moms with kids who were, who are autistic, moms that were military-wide, like all these different moms. Okay. And she had them write articles about their experience. So the idea would be that we could find a place for all moms to come together and learn something about each other in a safe space. And that started way 15 years ago, before I was even thinking about being a mom. And so in the last 2 years, she was ready. Her kids are older. She was ready to move on to new things. And so she was praying about who to pass this on to. Mm-hmm. And one day I received a call that literally, one day I received a call and like, we would love for you to take it over. And I'm like, me? I don't have time to do this. What are you talking about? So we prayed about it and just thought the concept of Mom Life Today, and how even in saying today, how that looks different from tomorrow and hopefully looks different than yesterday. And so there are a range of moms that have tons of wisdom who are experiencing things that I could not even imagine. So people look at me, I have 7 kids, but I can't imagine. I have friends who have special needs kids and they tell me their stories. And I'm like, I can't imagine, but I have so much more respect for what you experience. And I think sometimes in motherhood, it can be very isolating. We feel like we're the only ones that's going through what we're going through. And I think when we hear other people's stories, it gives us good perspective on our life and our kids and our journey. And we respect other moms and how they're doing it as well. That's why I said there's no one size fits all, because there's so many things that make it different. And so I took on Mom Life Today, and hopefully we'll do a lot more with it in the future as we, kind of create a sisterhood of moms from different walks of life with different experiences. And we come to the table and can respect how we do momming, and just having a safe place and a place that we can come and talk. And so we do that through social media. And hopefully, maybe one day it'll be retreats and times for us to gather moms of all spheres. And so that's really what Mom Life Today is, as it stands now, as a social community, so to speak, but hopefully trying to figure out ways for us to really tap into connecting with one another as moms, because I do think it's very isolating, and mom guilt is a real thing. And
it's very much a real thing.
Yes.
I have a child and I have mom guilt.
Yes, it's real. And so sometimes you need another mom to come along and be like, it'll be okay. Like, it's
Well,
okay.
What you said a little earlier when you said that your kids sometimes say that they can't do things that other kids do. I think that often they may not realize that they're able to do things, or they may have things that other kids wish they had. So I
Right.
think sometimes it's a matter of just kind of turning things around and seeing things from a different point of view. And I know that's very hard for kids to do. So
Yes.
I'm just wondering how you're able to do that, because I know you, of anybody, you recognize that you may have blessings that someone else doesn't have, and you try to share that with your kids to show that they may have blessings that somebody else doesn't have. So how do you communicate that with your kids?
Yeah, I think the best way is to have friends that look different than you do and are in different, situations and have different experiences, and then we're all talking about those things together. I think another thing I always tell my kids is, you may feel like you're the only one because no one else is speaking, but
Right.
sometimes it takes one person to stand up, and you realize you are not the only person in the room who can't have a whatever, and
Yeah.
someone else's mom is being mean too, you know what I mean, or whatever. And realizing that, there are more out there that are thinking differently or whatever. Just, there's always someone else. And so, I try to have my kids not feel like they're the odd person out, but simultaneously building character and saying, like, I am the odd person out, and I'm respecting what my parents say. I think that's what we always, time and time again, they're going to be in situations where it's going to be easier to follow the crowd. And so we're trying to encourage them in the little things that, it's okay if you're the only one, right? You can always blame mom and dad. Always blame me as the reason why you can't do anything. Like, you can be like, if my mom found out,
Right.
she will. I was like, do that all the time. Please use me, because guess what? There's going to be other situations where you're going to have to be the person that says no. And so, not wanting my kids to always have to be in the majority, that's okay. So it's just finding that balance between, the teaching moments, like, how much do you say, I want you to have a lot of friends and be in the popular crowd or be doing it, and how much do I want you to say, man, let's look at your situation here. What are we really talking about? There's things that you had, to your point earlier, you're really blessed. And just because you can't have this one thing, let's look at all the other stuff that you have. So it's weaving all of that in that I think creates the total person, right? And how they view themselves and their identity and what their identity is in anyway. And so I think that's where that's the wisdom that comes from other moms to help us communicate that differently to our kids and honestly to our kids. And then too, again, it's always that I'm always like, I always have to apologize when I have to apologize. Like, if I made a wrong choice, like, I should have let you go to that party. That was my fault. I'll take it. I'm sorry you missed it. And if that happens, then I'll fess up. But until then, we're just going to keep making these decisions and hoping that you're seeing the bigger picture that might be hard for you to see at 13. Right. So it's there.
Well, I think every generation, I used to tell my parents, so-and-so, that everybody, and kids always use everybody can do it except me. And my mom wasn't moved by that. I don't know. She just wasn't. I would, so I think it's just part of growing up that you look at what other people are doing. And then a lot of times those people who were able to do a lot of things that you couldn't do, you see them later on in life, and the pitfalls that they end up falling into because they didn't have the boundaries. Then you can appreciate your parents at that point. But that takes some time, wisdom, maturity, going through the school of hard knocks yourself. It takes some experiences to do that.
And I'll say this, I have recognized over the years that sometimes the parents want other parents to be they want to say no. The parents do, but there's a pressure that everyone's doing it.
That's true.
Then I don't want my kid to be left out. So they make a decision that they maybe necessarily don't want to make, but feel that they have to make. And so I found myself in these conversations with other moms and dads, and I'm like, so wait, why are we doing that? Like, wait, can we all just agree that this is not going to happen? And they're like, yeah.
Why do I have to be the butt? I don't want to be the butt anymore.
I was like, can we all do that? Can we all be the mean person? And then it's like, we're all united as parents. Like, we're all going to decide that we're not going to allow this to happen in 6th grade. We're just going to wait and try to push it up. And then we're all united, and then it's not even an issue anymore. I mean, yes, you may have one or two, but the vast majority of parents are saying, this is what we're going to do. And so that's where I try to do. That's what I try to go as well, is like, my kid is one thing, but go talk to the parents and hang out with the parents. Like, so tell me about this, whatever. And they're like, we hate it. I'm like, so can we just not do it? Because it would make it easy for everybody. So yeah. So I think there's a lot of ways to approach it. And I think sometimes as parents too, we feel the same pressure that our kids may be feeling.
Yeah. Now, I have 2 quick questions because we're getting close to the end of our time. It's been, did you have any questions, Ron? I don't want to occupy all the time. But I do have 2 questions. How did you handle COVID with all this, with 7 children? I
have to say, well, COVID was great. I don't know how else to say it.
Okay, well, that's good to hear. It's good to hear some positive feedback about it.
Yeah, we used to homeschool. And so I was used to having everybody under one roof. And so COVID brought everybody back because we were chosen to put the top 4 and the top 5 in school. And so they were back home under one roof, and we were living in Boston. And the coolest thing about it was when they were still virtual, it was snowing in Boston. And like in between classes, they would go out and play in the snow and then come back. And I just think my husband and I, we did like we just did a bunch of stuff that we had gotten away from. Like we didn't have to go driving to all the activities. We were just granted, yes, we were under one roof all day, right. But I think those are some of the memories that I will always remember, because it did bring us back together and like refocus on what was important.
I think that's the best way to look at the beginning of the COVID pandemic. Because it did bring a lot of families together. They were able to talk with each other and spend time with each other that they didn't have time to do before.
Right. Yeah, it was a good reorganization of like, okay, as we go back out, people get involved. Like, what are we really like? What's a good yes and what's a better yes? Mm-hmm. And so it helped us to like reestablish our foundation in our family of like making sure we're eating dinner together, making sure we're, all these things that didn't necessarily go away completely, but had kind of started drifting because we were so busy. And then it was like, oh, wait, hold on. These things are important before we go back. Let's make sure we establish those. So it's loud. I'm telling you, my house is loud and there's always something going on. So that part is, you need some nap time, but overall, like it was really positive for our family. Okay. And then my final question, your husband is a retired NFL player. So, Benjamin Watson. So how were you married to him when he was in the league? And, how has the retirement from the league, how has that transformed itself throughout the later years? Yeah, we met in college. We graduated sitting next to each other at the University of Georgia. And so he graduated in finance. I was in marketing, both in the business school. So we've known each other. We were just saying this over half of our life at this point. So we've been together a very long time. I mentioned 17 years in July. So I was there from the beginning. Yes. And so all of the moves, all 16 seasons, moves across the country. We were actually engaged the first season. Actually, I would say that we met in college our sophomore year, and we got married in 2005. And then he was drafted. So then he was drafted before that. So the first year we were doing premarital counseling. We had gotten engaged. So I was there for 15 of the 16 seasons married. And him being, I'm gonna tell you this, Benjamin will know that I say this, like I was ready for him to retire because it's just really tough watching someone you love play football. It just is. Because most people see what they see on TV, and it's, catching the touchdowns and the passes and the great blocks, and that's great. But, I see him Monday morning and like, the effects of football is tough. And so it just— What position did he play? He played tight end. So
Okay.
he was getting tackled. And so it just
Mhm.
got harder and harder to watch. And then I'm like, you better not leave me and not walk with all these 7 children. Like, you need to be in your right mind and your right body and all the things. So him
Right.
being at home has been a blessing. Even though he's not playing football, he is home most of the time. He's still out doing his thing and speaking and being a voice for the voiceless. So, I'm just honored to be, seeing him work, even though he's not doing that in football exactly like he was. But it has been a blessing having him home for sure. 100%.
You know what? As we were talking, I kept thinking that Ben Watson sounded familiar to me. And then I realized that he played for my beloved Saints.
Oh, yes. Who dat? The Who Dat Nation.
I was sitting there like, okay, I know his name. Yes.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Well,
Yeah.
Kirsten, we're at the end of our time. And so we want to make sure people know how to get your book. Sis, take a breath, and how they can connect with you on social media.
Yes. So you can buy it anywhere you buy books. Sis, Take a Breath, Kirsten
Okay.
Watson. And then you can find me on Instagram _Kirsten Watson _. I'm on Facebook. I am not on Twitter because I ain't got time for all that. But you can find me in all the other platforms to connect. So I'd love to meet new people. And I hope that the book is a blessing to you and just reminding you that God is in it. And he invites you just to take a pause, take a breath, and just do that before you move forward.
That's a great way to end this interview. That was a beautiful final
It's
word.
wonderful. Well, thank you
Awesome.
so
Thank
much
you.
for being a guest on the show, and continued success with your book, with your family, and all of the things that you're doing to help other mothers be better.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. It was fun.
Thank you for
Okay.
joining us. It was a great interview.
All right. Thanks.
Thank
All
you.
right. Have a great evening.
You too.
Okay, that was an interesting interview, and we've given away, we've determined who won the books. So we're ready for our next guest, and I think her first name is pronounced Kaia. I think Kaia Alderson, but she'll let us know if that's not the case. And we want to welcome her to Black Authors Matter TV. So it's Kaia Alderson. Did I pronounce it correctly?
Kaia Alderson.
Kaia. So it's 3 syllables. Okay. All right. Well, welcome to Black Authors Matter TV.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
And thank you for being here.
And I wanted to show a copy of your book that I have myself that I've read, Sisters in Arms. My book club read this book, and I have recommended it to several people. We read it.
Thank you.
I want to say 6 months ago, something like that. And it got very high rating.
Hey, thank you.
People really enjoyed it. So I wanted to show the book, and you probably have a copy of it as well. But I wanted to, is this your, from what I understand, this is your debut novel, is that correct?
It is my debut novel. I have had short stories and novellas published in different genres, but this is my first bona fide novel.
Okay. And I really, really enjoyed the book.
Thank you.
It focuses on, it's historical fiction, and as I say almost every week, anybody who watches this show knows I love history, and historical fiction is my favorite genre. So this book was different in that it focused on a different time. It was military focused, it was military focused. I think it's the first book I've read that was military focused with women. I read books that were military focused with men. But this was about World War II. And what made you focus in on that time period and create these amazing characters in this book?
It all started with this picture that my blur is going to mess up. This is a picture of the 6th 888 Postal Battalion marching in France during World War II. And I saw this on Twitter one day. Someone posted it, and I always thought of myself as a little bit of a World War II geek. And I knew about the Women's Army Corps, and intellectually we know Black people served and that we had a Women's Army Corps, but I'd never seen a picture of Black women in uniform. And I was just like, whoa, what is that? What's going on here? Because I know those uniforms look like World War II. That looks like Europe somewhere. And so on a lark, I just went to Google and put in Black women World War II soldier or something like that, and very quickly learned about the 6888 Postal Battalion. And they're another one, because I caught the tail end of your interview with Piper, where they just got lost in the cracks. If you go back to the newspapers from that time, the Black newspapers, they're mentioned here and there. So people knew about them, but as they grew older and they got out of the military, like even a lot of their family members didn't know until they were older or had passed that they had been a part of this historical unit, which was the only all Black, all female US military unit to go overseas during World War II.
Yeah, what my sorority, Zeta Phi Beta, has military advisory program, and one of the things that we've been doing is honoring the 6888. So I was really happy to see that that you wrote this book.
Thank you. I was actually at an event in DC last week celebrating that the unit had been awarded the Congressional Gold Medal, and the Zetas and the Sigmas represented. So there is a lot of blue and white.
Yeah, I'm so glad to hear that, and thank you for actually writing a book. I'm a veteran myself, so when I see books like this, I'm drawn to them, and to be able to tell the story of the Black woman soldier is amazing, because we don't have a lot of stories about us. You might hear a little bit more in this present age about the contributions Black women have made to the military and to the defense of our country, but you don't really hear about it in a historical sense.
That brings to mind this past fall, I actually went up to upstate New York, and I made a side trip to Auburn, New York, where Harriet Tubman, I just got a Harriet Tubman doll. I'm so excited. I visited her grave, and they actually have at her grave Civil War veteran. There's a little marker that's from Civil War vets, and I saw that, I almost burst into tears for that reason and for a variety of reasons. So those stories are coming out. Most people don't even realize that Harriet Tubman led a raid as a military raid during the Civil War. We have women that went over as nurses in the Spanish-American War, American Red Cross workers in World War I. We even had a Black nurse that went over as a independent in the Spanish Civil War and served there with the liberals. So we've been there. We've always been there. It's just telling those stories. We also have Kathy Williams, or William Kathy, a Black woman who posed as a man so that she could fight in the Civil War. So we're there. We just got to have the opportunity to tell these stories.
Yeah, I wrote a report on Kathy Williams back when I was in the military, and that was the first I had ever heard about her. And I was like, "Dang, this is an amazing story." And I'm so glad that what was the name of the movie that just came out? The Western movie.
Oh, was it? I forget. I know which one you're talking about.
I was glad that they featured her in that movie.
Yes.
What I was
Was it the one that's on Netflix?
I believe,
yes.
Yes. The one with
something the hard way. Yes.
The one with Idris. The Harder They Fall.
Yes.
Yeah, The Harder They Fall. Yes.
I still haven't watched it.
It's good.
I've heard it's good. I need to do that. So I didn't know exactly what the movie was about, but I didn't know about Harriet Tubman leading the regiment to lead the raid until the Harriet Tubman movie came out, and they had that at the end. And I thought I pretty much knew most of, her history, but we were talking about this earlier with Piper. One thing that happens with history is you get a lot of the same people that are discussed all the time, but even among the people within each individual person, there's certain little bullets of folklore, and they kind of get reduced down to 4 bullet points, and that's all you hear over and over. It's like Martin Luther King, I Have a Dream speech. That's mostly what people, if you ask people something about Martin Luther King, that's probably the only thing they can tell you. And they don't talk about all the, most people don't even know about the Montgomery bus boycott, which was really the
Okay.
Most people they don't know about Martin Luther King, and that they
Mhm.
don't know about that. They
That he
don't know
was
about the
26 year
economic
old. He was 26
side
years old
of,
when he led it. Mhm.
right. He was a very young man, and all the obstacles they had to go through to maintain the boycott. They got,
Mhm.
people trying to be tricked by putting false news stories in the paper to derail the
Mhm.
movement. But they've had their own communication system, and they
Mhm.
had a lot of Black women
Mhm.
doing some yeoman's work to just walk
Mhm.
and communicate with the community.
Or my favorite story is the sweet potato pie wars, where to help raise money, women would go bake sweet potato pies, and then they would go downtown, and the same white people who were against the boycott loved them pies, and they didn't know they were funding the boycott. And then there was one woman started doing it, and then another woman did it, and so at their weekly meetings they would have a war over who made the most money for the movement. So it was very much grassroots. It wasn't just the big names that we talk about, but
Right.
there's a lot of
It
untold
was.
stories in just in that one.
That's a beautiful story, and that makes me love sweet potato pie even more.
Well, there's also Mary McLeod Bethune. She started what's now Bethune-Cookman College, selling sweet potato pies. That's how she raised money.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. Where are you located?
Me right now, I am down in Southeast Georgia, right on the coast between Savannah and Jacksonville.
This is a Georgia night. You're our third guest, and our third located in Georgia. I don't know what's going on, or if Gwen planned it this way.
No, I didn't. I never planned geography.
Now I
so
think
as far as
I think most
that,
of the Black female historical fiction writers that have come out in the last couple of years were all in Georgia. Most of them are in Atlanta, but there's a couple of us on the coast.
Awesome, awesome. Yeah, I used to live in Savannah a long many years ago. But yeah, Georgia,
Beautiful city.
Now, are you, I mean, I really wonder if you're connecting with the military bases around you, because I feel like this is a great, not just for Black History Month, but for Women's History Month, or for Army Birthday, because this is a huge part of the military history that should be told.
I'm starting to, with the event that I was at last week, I connected with like the Military Women's Memorial, the people down in up in Fort Lee, Virginia, with the Army Women's Museum there. I've spoken to the Daughters of the Revolution, and my contact there was actually somebody who was stationed in Belgium. So, and then she was getting the word out, like she personally went and bought books for everybody that was under her command and said, "You all need to read this." So I was shocked and honored that she did that. So I'm starting to. I've met people here and there, and it's just.
Oh, you've made some great contacts. Great contacts.
So when you were doing the research for the book, how long did you research before you started writing, or were you researching and writing kind of simultaneously?
Excuse me. I first found out about the unit about 10 years ago. I went and ordered some books and read about it, but I already knew in my head I wanted to write Soldier Girl's Last Night in Town before she shipped out. And so at that time I was like, I don't think anybody's even interested in this, but this is my geek and I love it. I'll just write a historical romance novella about, she meets the perfect guy on the worst day, the day before she ships out, type of thing. So I went and I learned the basics of the story, and then I typed up a whole thing. And when I went to fact check myself afterwards, I was like, this is not historically accurate at all. Oh, they were the only unit of Black women to go over. So all this other stuff that I have fudging dates isn't going to work. So I had to go back and sit and rethink the story. And then in between time, it's like nobody wants to read this anyway, put it down, life happens, things like that. And then my now editor floated the same picture that I saw on Twitter, somebody write me this book. And so I was like, okay, wait, I'm already working on this. I have like 100 pages. And so when I talked to her and she said she wanted to do women's fiction and not a historical romance, then that's where the story evolved into what we see today, where it focuses on the women and the romantic elements take a backseat to it. So at that point, once the deal happened and we knew it was going to be women's fiction, that's where I went. I went to Fort Des Moines in Iowa. I went to the museum that's there. I hung out I spent a weekend in Des Moines actually with Piper, and we just drove around just to get a sense, because like the historical Black community there is not there anymore. They built their whole hospital complex over it. So we had to like just drive around and see what little bits and pieces might still be there, try to imagine, figure out which roads might have been there from the 40s and what was new. Then I also went I spent a week in New York. So I walked the streets. I grew up in New Jersey, but I hadn't been there in 20 years. So I just walked the streets of Harlem just to get the vibe again. I rode the trains. I went to the landmarks that I had. And then I also went to upstate New York, where Fort Shanks was, where everybody shipped out of. They were stationed there before they shipped out to go overseas. So I did walk, like in the song Tennessee, I walked the roads that they walked, and we drove the roads and just got a sense of everything. I did not get to go to Europe. I wish I had, but there are people over there who are actually telling the story of the 688 as well in Birmingham and in London. So hopefully when things calm down, I'll be able to go over and talk to them there as well.
Okay.
Mhm.
What led you to develop the title for the book, Sisters in Arms?
This book has had so many titles. It was originally Sister Soldiers. And in a meeting, I was like, I love the title, but I have a feeling that, there's also Sister Soldier, the
Yeah.
author. And
Yeah.
at first we're like, it won't be a thing. And then I think about 6 months out, that's when she announced her new book. And I was like, okay, so now we're gonna have to change it. And this Sisters in Arms was actually like my least favorite on the list, because that historical accuracy. Well, they didn't have weapons, so they couldn't defend themselves. And I was like, I don't like, I get that this is a title, but I don't like it. And then I sat and thought about it for 5 minutes. I'm like, you know what? This is actually the perfect title, because in World War II, just for those who don't know, women, it didn't matter what color they were not armed. They did not get weapons training. So in the case of the 6888, they had to use their minds. Their weapons were their minds, their creativity, their resilience, each other. And so you'll see in the book throughout where, it was literally, I got my sister with me and I have her back. And even if she's the one person in the world, I can't stand her guts. When stuff happens, it's only me and you here to do what we need to do, then we're gonna stand together. So that's the short version of how that title happened, but it is perfect when you think about when you read it and you really think about it.
Yeah, one of my book club members, Kay, reminded me that we read the book for our May. Well, it couldn't have been our May book.
That just happened.
Yeah,
but May feels like a million years ago.
It does. And I read so many books that I get sometimes the time frame gets confused in my mind. I know it was fairly recent. It might have been April. I'm gonna go back and look.
April was 2 decades ago.
It was. I read the book before the book club read the book, so that's what happened. I read it 6 months ago, but and I think I recommended it to the book club, and so they were later reading it than I was, and I recommended it to some other people. So did you? Because some people are really history buffs like I am. I love history, and I like somebody who creates a fictional story based on historical facts. I love that kind, because you still learn something, because there's still the history in there. Normally the authors, they do a tremendous amount of research to make sure that the book is accurate in terms of phraseology, locations, landmarks, and things like that. Social mores at the time.
Communication.
Yes.
Because I almost had an error go out, like in my very last pass, where you're just checking to make sure things are spelled right. I realized there's a scene where they find out that FDR died, and for those who don't know, FDR died in April of 1945, and I had them finding out the same day in the evening, which was totally impossible, because he died at 3:00 in the afternoon in the United States, and England and France are like 6 or 7 hours ahead. So even by the time he at the time of his passing was 9 o'clock, around 8 or 9 o'clock at night over there. So I was like, oh, I guess I'm going to have to rewrite this whole section really quick. And so I had to actually go and find out, when would they have found out? There wasn't any email, there wasn't CNN, there wasn't anything like that.
No
Luckily,
cell
somebody
phones, they couldn't have text, text messages.
Nothing. Yeah, I mean, even high level brass couldn't do that. I was able to find out the King of England found out at midnight, local time, England time. And so then I think it was by noon-ish or early evening the next day is when the word went out to all the troops in Europe. So, there's little things like that, at that point we had like 5 passes. I'd read the book at least 10 times, and it was just like, oh, duh, Kaia, fix that, because someone will call you out on it. So it is like little, you have to put those things in your head. And I even have like a whole book of all the major art. It wasn't all the articles from the New York Times, but it was like a whole collection of the New York Times from World War II. So I could go and see, what did they know when? When we know how everything turned out, but they didn't know. So it was interesting just to go back and pretend, okay, what did we know? What did we know it? When did we know it? And can we make this interesting?
That's the important part of doing the research when you're writing a story. And I'm so glad that we're having this conversation now, because I think a lot of people don't realize the importance of, or the significance, I should say, of research when you're writing. We sometimes you might think, okay, well, let me just Google this real quick. Okay, this happened on such and such day, so okay, I can include it in the story. But what you said makes so much sense. Okay, yes, it did happen on this day, but what people have found out, when there's no email, there's no cell phones, photography was different back then, so how would they have known? So I mean, I think that's a great point that you're making.
And there's also another part in the story that I fictionalized, and even then communication was important, where she witnessed something happen, but she couldn't react to it or follow up on it until almost a day later. And in that time, what happened in that character's mind of all the possibilities of what could have and what she should have done, she had to stew on that. So that was a good plot point.
Did you, since the New York Times is the newspaper of record for many decades, they consider themselves to be, were you able to find articles in there, or was most of your information from the Black newspapers during that time?
If not for the Black press, I wouldn't know a lot of the facts that I was able to dig up on this, including that little twist we won't talk about at the end. I found that, because I've had people say that's too good to be true. Okay, but here's the article from 1946 or 1945. So it happened, and say what you want, but it happened. Even with my current project, I am relying heavily. I have a newspapers.com account. I'm in it all the time, and I was able to dig up so many wonderful tidbits on just everyday Black life. Back then, and if you watch like the documentary 688, things like that, they talk about it. We were not mentioned in these major publications unless it was something bad. Somebody got caught stealing something, somebody got shot, things like that, kind of what we see today sometimes. But in terms of the little things, like even the role of the Black press in educating people in far out places, the Pittsburgh Courier had a nation, even though it's technically focused on Pittsburgh, it had a nationwide distribution, subscriptions and things like that. So I was able to, see, even like one of my friends, she wanted more information about her mother who served, and we were able to pull up the announcement her grandparents put about, Janie Q joined the Army and she's going to be an officer and she's here. And, her job is, working in the USO, things like that. So you were able to find personal history. I found out after the fact that after I turned the book in, that my great aunt, who I didn't have a chance to meet, was an officer in the WAC. And so I was able to learn more about her and some other family members. So without the Black press, what we do as writers, it would be that much more difficult, and it's an invaluable resource. And even, last week I met the publisher of the Afro-American, which is based out of Baltimore, and I told her straight up, thank you, because what you're doing now matters for the future. We won't know what's really going on, in our community without your work.
Beautiful.
That's amazing. So have you been, have any people reached out to you who have relatives that were in the WAC from that time period?
I did not talk to anybody in depth until last week at the event, where I got to meet the families. And even the first family I saw, I was just like, oh, hey, are you here for the event? I wrote the book. And she's like, you mean this book? And then, they were just telling me how much it meant to them. One family didn't even know about the push to get the unit the Congressional Medal, and that there were people, there's the beginnings of a group of the families until they read my book. And in the back, I think Colonel Edna Cummings, who was one of the organizers or the people who were pushing the bill. And from there, they were able to connect with this group. They were at that event because of the book. One woman, her mother-in-law served in the 6th AAA, and she's reading this book, and she's like, I now have a better sense of the little bits and pieces that her mother-in-law told her before she passed, just to get, grounded in reality for her. So I've heard from other military women, and they said I got it right, because I am not military and I'm not from military family. So I really did try to get that experience and right. So it's been really exciting. Even I was able to, there was 4 known Afro-Latina members of the 6th AAA. I only knew about one when I was writing it. I was able to work that in, and I worked it in a way where I used her name specifically, but I also in another scene did it I didn't name the person. So people were reading it and they're like, okay, that could have been my grandma, literally. Or even one lady, her grandmother is still alive. And she's like, that, I like to imagine that being my grandma. So I did, whenever I could, I tried to use actual names of women, and so when I was meeting the families, oh, who's your family member? And if they were in the book, I was like, oh, I mentioned them, in this part, or from what I can remember is like, I did my best. In one of my books, there's a list of like the known 855 members, so I was able to refer to that.
Did you ever come to a point like, oh man, I have way too much, I'm trying to include too much in, because you have so much in the book? Did you ever feel like, okay, this is too much, I have to pull back now?
Yeah, there's actually stories I didn't get in. There was a Black female whack band that didn't go over, but that has a really interesting story. There was the women who went on strike in Massachusetts and were court-martialed with the possibility of death because they mutinied. But that's part of the reason why my main characters were not real people, because there was no one person that was in every experience, right, all of those different things. So I needed fictional characters, and I needed 2 of them to, kind of play against each other. So we're one, like in the one scene where this is based on historical fact, where Black women in uniform were attacked. And if they were officers, if they were in the wrong place at the wrong time by themselves, they would get attacked. Well, obviously I couldn't have, everybody, I had to be able to play around with that and the timing, things like that. So yes, it was helpful to be able to do fictional characters. And now my next book is actually based on a real person. And so that has its own challenges. And I'm like, okay, why did I agree to do this? Next one is going to be fictional. Yeah, next one after book number 3 is going to be fictional again.
Okay, so what's your next book about?
The Negro Leagues baseball.
Yay, great story.
A lot of people don't realize that there is actually a woman in Cooperstown in the Baseball Hall of Fame. She was she co-owned a Negro League team, and I'm pretty sure in my mind, she's Black, but a lot of people won't say for sure. No one can say 100% sure if she was a white woman who chose to live Black, a Black woman who passed when needed, but she was very, very blatantly Black. So I have her bobblehead right here. Her name was Effa Manley. And so she was very interesting. Basically from her conception to her death, it was soap opera. And even narrowing that down, I was able to do it in like a 14-year span and whittling away all this other stuff. I mean, I could have done 2 tomes on her if I wanted to.
So this is the book like a
biographical fiction. Yeah.
Oh, okay, it's biographical fiction.
Yeah.
So it's sort of like the book, many books that are, because you have to create dialogue and you have to make the story readable, and
sometimes there's not enough there it's not enough there to say this is what definitely happened, but I'm pretty sure this is what happened.
Right. Well, that's wonderful. Now, so do you plan to continue along this path of bringing history to life?
Oh, I have a list. I'm not going to have time to write all these books, because even some people have gotten deals on stories. I'm like, oh, that was on my list, but it wasn't high up. And I'm like, and that's why like the 2 stories I'm developing past the baseball one, I'm like, I'm not even going to say what they are, because if somebody, at least with one of them, if somebody were to jump on it before I got to it, it'd break my heart.
Uh-oh. Don't say anything. Don't say
Keep it close
Oh,
to
no,
the
no, no.
vest.
Oh, no. Don't worry. This one's it's gonna be good. Everyone's like, word, what? So I can't wait for that one to be announced.
Okay, well, Miss Alderson, because I don't want to butcher your first name.
Mhm.
I remember you told me what it was, but I'm trying to remember if it was Kate. I can't remember if it was
Kaia.
Kaia. Okay,
Mhm.
so it's like KYEEAH
Something
phonetically.
like that. Yeah.
Okay, well, let us know how people can get a copy of Sisters in Arms.
You can
It's a
get
great
it.
book. I recommend it. It's really, really good.
Thank you. You can get it wherever books are sold. If you're the type of person that must have a book in hardcover, then the Book of the Month Club, you can get it from there. It's not in the airports anymore. For a good part of the last year, it was in the airports, but when I flew last week, it wasn't there anymore. But I'm sure you can still get it on the Hudson Books website. So just look for it. And anybody who gets it, I appreciate your support, and I hope you enjoy the story. I think you also asked me about social media.
Yes.
On Instagram and Twitter, I am at Kaia Writes, as in writing.
Okay.
So it'd be KAIAWRITES. And on Facebook, it is author Kaia Alderson.
Okay. Well, thanks so much, Kaia, for being a guest on Black Authors Matter TV. Keep writing. I loved your book.
Thank you.
Look forward to your other upcoming titles that you're going to be writing over the years, your list. I look forward to you completing your list and writing all those books.
Thank you.
Okay, you have a great evening.
Have a great night. And
thanks
once again for the great conversation.
Thank you. I enjoyed it.
All right, you take care.
Right.
Okay, so we have a night of history from all different decades and time periods. So our final guest is Suzette Harrison, and her book is based on, I believe, like the 20s and 30s, 1920s and 30s. And she's written several books. This is just her latest book. And it's called The Dust Bowl Orphans. And I had the books because our book club read this book for our June book, and we just discussed it a couple of weeks ago. So it got really, really high ratings. So everyone really loved the book. And we read your other book as well, The Girl at the Back of the Bus or something like that. So that was maybe last year, a while back. And welcome back to Black Authors Matter TV, because you were on the show maybe a year ago, maybe not even that long ago, with the other book that you had. And this one was recommended by a book club member. And we said, well, sure, her other book was really great. Let's try it. And I read it quickly, and it's kind of thick. It's on 350 pages. So it's not, but it really, really is a compelling story. Different than others that have been told from a historical perspective. So that's enough from me talking. Suzette, welcome to Black Authors Matter TV.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you this evening. I'm grateful and appreciative. Greetings from California.
Yeah.
California. So what is it? It's 9:30 here, so it's 6:30 there. Is it still daylight?
It is. It is still kind of bright out and hot, over 100 degrees.
We've had that in Houston for 2 weeks. Almost every day it's been either 100 or like 98 or 101. And we haven't had rain for 2 weeks. And it's really rough on your lawn, your grass, just the living things is hard. And even the animals, your pets and everything. Absolutely. So, but we really love the book, and it's about the Dust Bowls, starting in Oklahoma, but they don't stay in Oklahoma.
No, ma'am.
But that's where the story starts. Well, and I love this picture.
Can you explain the Dust Bowl?
Yes, ma'am. Absolutely. For most of us probably are familiar with it through Grapes of Wrath by John Steinbeck. That's where most of our historical or literature comes from. But the Dust Bowl occurred in the early 1930s in Oklahoma and other southwestern states like Texas, for example. But what happened was when the crops, excuse me, not the crops, but the soil was over-tilled, overworked, and then on top of that, there was a drought for many years. So you had this dry soil that would just blow when the winds would come because the plants were just devastated as a result of it as well. So there wasn't a lot of foliage, to keep the dirt down. But we're not talking about small little dust. I got some dust in my eyes. We're talking storms, storms that were so significant and large that the sky would darken. It could be broad daylight, and all of a sudden, here comes this. They call them black blizzards, or that was one of the names by which they were called because the soil in Oklahoma specifically was black. And so here comes this dust, and here comes this storm of wind, and all of the soils in the air. And just to give you a kind of perspective for those who weren't familiar with it, the dust would be so high sometimes that it would come up to the house roof. Imagine like a one-story house, dust piled all the way up to the roof in the aftermath of the storm. It would be so severe that sometimes children could not get home from school. If they were at school and one of the severe black blizzards blew in, they'd have to stay overnight sometimes just to let that blizzard clear. So crops were decimated, livestock was damaged. Of course, there's no, food for the livestock. So livestock was lost, lives were lost, families were decimated by these black blizzards. Think about farmers, for example, in the Dust Bowl Orphans in the book, the family, the Wilsons, they're farmers, but they can't farm because of these black blizzards and the droughts, et cetera. So it was a devastation that was natural in cause, but had great economic impact as well.
What made you focus on that, on the Dust Bowl?
Well,
for your novel?
Yes, ma'am. The dedication is a clue. The dedication is to my maternal great grandparents, Samuel and Connie Johnson, who lived in Oklahoma. So that little town in the book, Wellston, that's where my grandfather was born. And my grandfather lived in that. It's a literal town. That's not fictitious. My grandfather was born and lived in Wellston. And my great grandparents packed up our family around the same time that the Dust Bowl occurred and the story occurs, and moved our family, migrated to California. So for me, it's an ode of honor and recognition back to my great grandparents for having the courage to leave home and to leave a place that no longer served or suited them or was beneficial for my family. And they had the courage during that time, the Depression, the Dust Bowl, to still move the whole family to California.
There was a lot that they were up against, and they were still able to persevere.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. And they made it to Southern California. San Bernardino is, slightly mentioned in the book, and that's where my family landed originally when we first got to California.
As I listened to you talk about the Dust Bowl, I mean, I experienced some of it. I'm former military. I was in the Army, and when we were stationed, when we went to combat, there were many times where we were stationed in the desert, and we remember those times when the dust would kick up like that and the entire sky would go dark. And it happened so many times, we would just have fun with it and say, okay, there's another sandstorm, let's go take a picture in it, because it would be the sand would be so high. So as you were talking, that's what I was picturing. And so if it was any worse than that, I can imagine what they had gone through at that time.
I think that's a wonderful analogy, example, Dr. Lawson, because that's what most of us can visualize is the more contemporary aspects of, dust storms. And since we've been, in Afghanistan and other places, that is a good way to think about it. But yeah, we're talking severe black. Just imagine that dust that you saw, black, and it's in your throat and it's in your eyes. Right. Your eyes are running, and you have these, they called it black pneumonia. It was so bad it would give, people pneumonia. So yeah, absolutely.
Yes, absolutely. Remember that you'd be a whole different color. You take a shower and all of that. Yes. So You're
Go
probably
ahead,
about.
Rhonda. Go
Hey,
ahead,
I
because
was
I
just
can
gonna
hold
say,
mine.
tell us a bit more about the story. We're talking children of the Dust Bowl, so let's talk a bit about the children.
Absolutely. So even on the cover, you see the depiction of two sisters or two girls, and those girls are sisters. The older one is Faith. She's 15 when the novel opens, and then her baby sister is Hope, and she's 5 when the novel opens. So this story starts on April 14th, 1935, and it's an actual incident that happened. It's recorded in history as the worst dust storm in US history. So you have these two girls, they're on the eve, or excuse me, on the tail of a family tragedy, which I won't, spoil.
Don't reveal. I won't do a spoiler.
No spoilers. It's a family tragedy, and now the family is picking up and migrating to California. But again, it's April 14th, and in out of nowhere comes this sudden black storm, this black blizzard. And Hope and Faith, the two little girls on the cover, they get separated from their family.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how the story opens. Can you imagine? I can't imagine being 15 years old with my 5-year-old sister out in the middle of a black storm, and then they have to take cover. And when they come out of taking cover, their family is nowhere to be seen. I can't imagine that kind of
I
situation.
don't want to imagine.
Yeah, I don't want to imagine.
Yeah.
You're right. And then put on top of that, think about it, it's 1935, it's Oklahoma, the Midwest, Mid-South rather, or Southwest, pardon me. And there's Jim Crow, and there's racism, and there's a lack of safety. They didn't have a cell phone that they could just pick up, Mama, here I am back here, come back and get me, Daddy, come get me. They didn't have that technology. And here they are isolated from their family. What do we do now?
Mm-hmm.
You painted the picture so well with how they got, how the storm came about, how Faith and Hope were together and battling against the dust blizzard, the black blizzard, and then how they ended up seeking shelter. I won't reveal all the details. And then that was very realistic, the picture you painted about them finding shelter, but it's black, it's dark because of the dust. So, you have to, they're in something unfamiliar where they have to try to figure out their bearings and so forth. And then they think they hear their family voices, and then they find out it's not. So anyway, that's all I'm saying about it. But it's really, really a great book. Like I said, they got a very high rating from everybody in the club. Everybody, they got a very high rating. And I want to ask a question. This picture is just really just beautiful. It's just depicting it. It's such a beautiful, accurate depiction from the clothes. Now, is this based on a photograph, or is this an illustration that someone created from pictures from the period?
So that the graphic artist from my publisher created that. I can take no credit for it, but when I first saw it, I thought it was beautiful. I love the sky, the colors. I love even in the clothing that Faith and Hope are wearing. I thought that captured their essence, and even some of the things that they go through with regards to that kind of crazy looking hem on Faith's dress.
Yes.
I didn't know what I'm referring to.
Right.
And standing in the roadway, just looking down the distance with no one else out there. I thought the graphic artist captured that beautifully.
Yeah. He or she did. Was it a male or female?
That, I don't know, in all honesty, but again, that's the publisher.
Publishers.
Right. Choose the graphic artist to do the cover.
But yeah, even down to her socks.
Yeah.
And the shoes they wore. I mean, this is really just perfect.
Yeah, those socks, those shoes, honey, they are cute.
Back then people only had one pair of shoes. If they had one, I mean, a lot of poor people, if they had one, a lot of times in the summer, they didn't really have shoes. They would have shoes for the wintertime. That happened with poor people who lived in rural areas that just use their feet. And, they lived in nature So they didn't necessarily, everybody needs shoes, but they could make it work, you know. They had to make it work. They didn't have any choices. So this book came out, what month?
February of this year.
Okay, so I knew it was new, but I hadn't heard about the book until our book club member recommended it.
Well, I'm glad you did.
Yeah, then we all said yes, and then we all read it, and then I'm like, wow, this is amazing. So now are all of your books historical?
No, not all. I would say what, 5? I think 5 out of
Because we read 3. We read Taffy a while back.
Right, a long time ago.
And then we read the one before, The Girl in the Back of the Bus, and this one. And they're all historical from different periods, though.
That's my love and that's my passion. I write contemporary. I've written romance. I've written even a children's book. But that African-American history, that is my passion. And I feel like that's where I go home and I get to sit with my ancestors and I get to hear their stories and I get to let them feed through me and to flow through me. That's where I feel like that's my space.
Is there a process that you have when you get ready to write, especially when you're writing your historical fiction?
Absolutely, Dr. Rhonda. So a lot of research. This book that's coming out in September, talk about research. I had probably 10, 11, 12 tabs open at all times on my computer while
That's my computer every day.
You understand.
Yes.
So with historicals, for me, although it's fiction, I have some license, I still must ground it in that time period.
Yes.
So, you know, like we're talking about the Dust Bowl orphans, if Faith pulled out a cell phone, oh, wait a minute, there weren't cell phones doing this. You know, so you want to avoid those anachronisms and make sure that it's grounded. So my process is a lot research, taking lots of notes. Even in this book that's coming out in September, I created a spreadsheet. There was just so much detail that I wanted to capture. So I always strive to bring authenticity, and so that the book reads authentically and that you feel like you've been taken, the reader feels like they've been taken to another time, they've been transported. So research, I'll listen to the music of the period. I'll listen to even maybe a radio, if there is a radio broadcast of the period, look up newspaper clippings. I myself try to immerse myself as much as possible in whatever the era is that I'm writing. And I try to divorce myself of my contemporary ideologies and my contemporary thinking and my contemporary experiences as much as possible, unless those experiences serve the story somehow. Right. Otherwise, I try to divorce and disconnect myself.
Does that mean no TV, no music, nothing that's contemporary while you're writing?
Exactly. So it's like an immersion, just go all in into that period. And when I'm writing, I'll have maybe instrumental ambient music in the background because it helps me to focus, but otherwise I disconnect. I'm not a big TV watcher anyhow. I have my favorite shows that I might watch, so it's easy for me to disconnect and not feel like I'm missing out on TV or the world. And to tell you the truth, I love going back in time. I love going back to and imagining what was it like. Even the language was different. The lingo is different. So how to capture that, and sometimes I can't always capture it through research. Pardon me. So I have to use my imagination. I try to remember the way my grandparents spoke, or the crazy things, funny things my mama still says, and to try to pull them as references, so that, like I said, as much as possible, I can weave an authentic, genuine sounding story.
Beautiful.
Well, it's definitely that. It takes you back to the time, and each of the scenes that you write, you're propelled back to that time. You can really imagine yourself in the situations you describe, and the way that Faith, who's the main character, well, most of the narrative flows through Faith. The way she responds to situations that she encounters, you think to yourself, would I respond the same way? What would I have done under those circumstances? And a lot of times what we have to do is divorce ourselves from the way we would respond now versus the way we would have had to respond in 1930, whatever, because that's a whole different thing. And that's why when people say, I'm not my ancestors, they have those shirts. I think that's totally disrespectful, because if you were your ancestors and you did what you did now, you'd be dead. So, I mean, if you did that back then, you would have been killed immediately or violated in some way. You wouldn't have been able to, and it's not that they didn't want to fight back. They just had to fight back in the most wise way to preserve their lives and their families' lives. You know, they had to figure out how to navigate all of this and still move forward. And that took a lot of faith and prayer and fight. But, you know, they had to fight smartly.
Exactly. And like Dr. Rhonda said, I hate that slogan. I hate that saying. I feel it is disrespectful.
It's totally
disrespectful. It's like we are here because our ancestors did what they had to do.
Right.
And without their struggle, we wouldn't be here to be able to make those kind of arrogant statements.
Right.
And
Exactly.
Statements. And again, we're, like you said, we're using our current sensibilities. Oh, I wouldn't take that, and I wouldn't do this, that. You would do whatever you had to do to survive. And
I used to say that whenever I would watch civil rights movies with my mom or with my grandmother, and you know, something would happen to say, I would have said such and such. And my grandmother would just like, no, you wouldn't have. That's all she said about it. I'm like, okay, you're right.
Yeah, exactly. We stand on the back of their freedom and struggle. And now we can make these big, bold, bad statements. But had we been there in the time, we would have done what we needed to survive. Some of us fought and died. Some of us fought and survived. And like you said, we used different strategies. It wasn't always aggressive in the face. We worked the system, you know, for our own good. So no, I disavow those statements. I just like them.
We don't realize the strength that it took not to do something. You know, we think that we had to do something to show power, but it showed power often to not do anything, because had that father decided to fight back, he probably could have put his entire family at risk. He had to think about all those other things that took a lot more precedence than his pride.
That's right. And there's even a scene in the book where something happens to Faith, where she's accosted by a gang of peers, and they, you know, attack her and assault her. And she, in that moment, has to make a choice not to fight back, just to save herself and her sister.
And that's very real. Just thinking back, just about some people that we've heard about historically. For example, Strom Thurmond, who was a senator from South Carolina for, I don't know how many years he was in the Senate, but a long time, because when he died, he was like 90, he was barely able to walk. He was like 97 or something like that. But he had a daughter, a Black daughter, with her mother was either 15 or 16, cleaning his house. And he raped her. He raped her, and the result was a daughter that he did not acknowledge in public ever. But I read her biography. She died not that long ago.
Right. She was actually interviewed not long after his death.
Right. That's when she came out. After he died, she came out and told her story. And he actually financed her education and would, you know, give her money, have her come to his office, but never as his daughter. You know, he would never publicly acknowledge that. But that's what her mother couldn't have fought back. What could she do? She was working there as a maid. He had the power.
Absolutely.
And she couldn't tell him. She couldn't. She couldn't turn him into the police. I mean, she had no options. She had
Right.
no options.
Right. And I think that's a wonderful tie back to the Dust Bowl orphans. You see that Faith doesn't
Yes.
have a lot of options. She doesn't
Yes.
have a lot of self-agency. She
Right.
has to make choices that are available to her. And she's even confronted with a situation, a sexual situation, where she is being asked or want, to do certain things, and she finds a way out. And she, thankfully
Right.
finds a way of escape. But it wasn't always the case historically. So, that was very a touchy point for me, because I even had the discussion with my editor, and try not to do spoilers, but she wanted them to actually, get married. And like, that's not
No.
That's not resting well with me. Okay, they get married, but are they going to consummate? And I'm not going to say anything. I'll let the reader go
Right.
find out if
Yes.
they do or if they don't. But that didn't sit well with me. I'm like, I can't write sexual violation of Black women.
Right.
Our history is too rife with it, so
Yeah.
I'm so glad that Faith found a way to do what she had to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the way that they were able to escape their situation, but it was very harrowing and these are children.
Right.
That's the thing you have to keep in mind. And she's having to try to figure things out really as an adult, even though she's only 15, thrust into a situation that, and I was wondering to myself, if this was me, how would I handle it? And you have to think about more than yourself. You have to think about this, your 5-year-old sister. And you did an amazing job of writing the character. You really wrote her just well. The whole thing, but the story moves through Faith. And so that's really, it was just a great book.
Thank you. I so appreciate that. And, I drew on the women in my life to be able to form her character, to form her strength, to form her tenacity. I was able, to draw on my matrilineal line. And, I feel a lot of my mother in Faith, and her tenacity and her strength and her power. I feel that, I was able to put that into Faith because I've seen it myself. I've, lived with a woman who was tenacious. But like you said, Miss Gwen, if it were me, Hope and I would still be stuck in that cellar. Because I wouldn't know what to do.
No, it was very harrowing. I mean, it's you had a lot of action, but it was not the kind of action like fighting or anything like that. You had a lot of action in terms of the situation that they were in and the different things they had to go through. It was really, and Kay, who is in the book club, she was telling me we read the book in May, but I read it in January, I think, or February, whenever it came out. And then, no, I'm getting mixed up with the previous book. I read this book a month ago. But she said amazing writing. That's what Kay said. It was the writing is just incredible. So you said you're working on another book? You're always working on books.
We're in the editing process right now.
Okay.
And that comes out in September. And it's the same kind of dual timeline like the Dust Bowl Orphans and The Girl at the Back of the Bus, where you have a contemporary and a historical character and narrative running side by side. And I like to kind of think of them like trains on a parallel track that eventually, meet and connect. So that one will come out on September 6th, and it's called My Name is Ona Judge. And for those who don't know, Ona Judge was an actual person. So that's why this book was harder. Like I said, Dr. Rhonda, I had 11, 12. Open doing research.
I can imagine it.
She's based on a real living character, or someone who, a true person is based on a true story. So I was even more so dedicated to accuracy as much as possible, and just research. Oh my goodness, up the yin yang. But for those who don't know, Ona Judge was an enslaved lady's maid to Martha Washington, the first lady of the United States of America.
Oh,
We're going to find out about Ona's life and who she was. And that's what that book is all about. And then, of course, it has a contemporary character and who finds
okay.
something out about Ona. And, we'll see that that quilting, I like to call it that connecting and that overlapping and how they connect.
Well, I can't wait to read it and to let people know how they can get the Dust Bowl Orphans or any of your books
Yes,
and
ma'am.
connect with you via social media.
Yes, ma'am. I am on Facebook, Suzette D. Harrison Books. You can obtain the books through my website, of course, through Amazon or wherever fine books are sold. My website is sdhbooks.com. So, and then as far as Instagram, I'm Suzette Harrison 2200. And I love connecting with readers. So please feel free to connect with me and reach out anytime. That's one of the hidden joys of being an author, is being able to touch and connect with live human people who love to read books as much as I love to read and write books. So that is a joy for me, and I mean that sincerely.
Beautiful.
Okay, well, thank you for being a guest again on the show. And we look forward to hearing about your upcoming book and having you back again.
Thank you so much, ladies. I appreciate your time, and it's always a joy, an honor, and a privilege, and blessings to you both. And thank you.
And blessings to you as well. You have a great night. And thank you so much for being a part of the show.
Thank you. My pleasure. Good night, ladies.
Good night. Well, that was another amazing show. If I wasn't gonna say if I should say so myself, but if we should say so ourselves, we have some amazing shows. I mean, I'm really excited that there's so many Black women in particular writing books about Black women as main characters and writing so well. I mean, just the craft is just amazing. So that's it for tonight. We will be back next week with another amazing episode of Black Authors Matter TV. I'm Gwen Richardson signing off.
And I'm Dr. Rhonda Lawson. Have a wonderful night and a great rest of your week.
And we'll see you next Tuesday at 7.
Bye.
Thank you for tuning in, and join us next Tuesday at 7 p.m. Central, 8 p.m. Eastern for another edition of Black Authors Matter TV.